women, and now even our children and young men are suffering from. And an endocrinologist he's a specialist in hormones. And the reason why I've become a specialist myself out of necessity, because everyone seems to have hormone problems. And the reason why is, one, natural physiology. If you're 40 years of age, you're going to start to experience some hormonal symptoms. And then if you talk about pollution, the pollution is basically interfering with all the cells of our body, interfering with the normal hormonal production. But hormones, you talked about vaginal dryness. Okay, that's about talking about female hormones. Well, female hormones, they go through menopause, and I'm seeing young women, 30 years of age, going through premature menopause, Doug.
30 years old?
30 years old now.
The funny thing about having Dr. Connealy on my show, I picked up a bottle of water I keep hidden back off the set and went to drink it, and she said, plastic xenoestrogens. Doug, what are you thinking? Neat person to have on today's show to talk about some of these hormonal aberrations that we go through from time to time, and women especially, although men go through this also. We'll talk about that when we get back. You know, one of the things that frustrates me most is when I used to work in hospitals and medical clinics, was seeing a patient coming in to the doctor, the endocrinologist, or the family practitioner, and saying, you know, my blood sugar, I'm sweating, I'm thirsting, I'm urinating a lot. My blood sugar really seems wrong. I'm having these weird things going on in my brain. And the doctor's saying, you need more insulin. Let's regulate your insulin. Let's regulate your thyroid. You're gaining a little weight? Hey, let's take a little more thyroid. That's the body tweaking that takes place inside pharmaceutical medicine. But there's a whole nother field of medicine. These are physicians who are bold enough after medical school to step forward and say, something's wrong. Tweaking thyroid medicine isn't the obvious answer, but it does allow you to see 100 patients a day and get insurance payments. Then every once in a while you have a Lee Erin Connealy. Dr. Connealy, respectfully, all her friends and patients know her as Dr. Connealy, who says, I need some time with that patient. It's not okay to keep giving them medicine without assisting them in understanding what we say in medicine, the etiology, the cause, without knowing the cause of why their blood sugar is fluctuating, why their weight is doing that. So welcome aboard and thank you so much. Let's start in this first segment with diabetes, probably the #1 autoimmune disease that Americans suffer from. Then let's go on, and so don't go away. In the second half of the show, I want to talk with Dr. Connealy about hormonal aberrations of the male and female sex, from hot flashes to the androgens that men, are hormones that go wild, testosterone and so forth. So if you would, teach me a little bit about diabetes.
Gosh, Doug, this is something I lecture on all the time. And it's interesting because diabetes, and let's talk about not just diabetes, because diabetes, the traditional definition of diabetes is when your blood sugar on laboratory values have to be X. But we have pre-diabetes, and pre-diabetes is the condition where you're not quite a diabetic, but you're showing signs that your blood sugar is elevating. And so I use the parameters. If your fasting blood sugar is over 99, we have a problem. That's been recently changed. It used to be 110, now it's 99.
It's coming down.
Yes, it's coming down, just like cholesterol's come down. And then we have blood sugar. We have this test called a hemoglobin A1C, which reflects your blood sugar over 90 days. I tell people, the regular blood sugar gives me a commercial of your blood sugar, but I'm interested in the movie of your blood sugar, which is the hemoglobin A1C. And about 70% of the population now is suffering from pre-diabetes. The people who have diabetes, 50% don't even know they have it, all right? So what are the symptoms of diabetes? Well, frequent urination, like you mentioned, you're excessively thirsty, you're fatigued, you may crave sugar, you're putting on weight, especially around the middle. All these men and women out there, if you're gaining weight around a woman, that's a sign that your blood sugar is imbalanced. Okay, what are the causes? Causes can be, first of all, I tell people, we are a carbohydrate addict society. We love sugar. People eat about 150 pounds of sugar a year. Carbohydrates, what I call the unfavorable, bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, or what unfavorable, they just turn into sugar. People, the children watch 5 hours of television a day. People don't exercise.
We get lots of exercise.
Yes, we get lots of exercise with the remote.
Or both thumbs.
Right.
You know, it's
so
amazing.
we don't exercise. And then probably the most important recent finding is the persistent organic pollutants in the environment that are basically changing the receptor sites on the cell wall. So the insulin now can't even work to bring the blood sugar into the cell to be utilized. So therefore you just create this vicious cycle of I need more insulin, and you're just basically wearing out your pancreas. So it's a very, very, very serious problem because the ramifications and danger of this chronically elevated blood sugar, what are they? Blindness, losing a leg, cancer, hypertension, heart disease, stroke. I can go on and on. So it's a problem that doctors aren't looking for. In my patient population, because we look for it in all of the practitioners that work in our clinic, I would say over 50% of my patients are pre-diabetic or diabetic. So we hold diabetes classes. I'm a big proponent of education. You can't change your condition unless you understand your condition. And I think that's the big thing, Doug, that you're trying to get across when you do these shows.
Dr. Connealy, I worked for a few years at USC Medical School out in California. And I'll never forget a day, everybody was at lunch, and the buzzer rang. I was on the 9th floor. And the buzzer rang, and I walked down all these stairs, and I picked up 2 boxes. They had little white mice in them. It was a diabetes center. They were studying diabetes. And later, decades later, I would find out mice don't get diabetes. We have to induce diabetes. Can you imagine the little syringe for a mouse, little tiny beep? You give the shot to the mouse. The shot contains something called a mycotoxin, fungal metabolite, a fungal poison. A mycotoxin in this case is called streptozotocin. When you inject streptozotocin, a fungal byproduct, into mice, they all get diabetes. Now, why doesn't some PhD who injects those mice go home and lay down with his wife at night and stretch with his arm around the back of her neck and say, honey, you're not going to believe this. I'm inducing diabetes in laboratory mice with fungus. I totally subscribe to everything you've said. Once the antibiotic goes in, once the mycotoxin gets in our body, even diabetes, I'm convinced cancer is intimately linked with these mycotoxins, with these fungi. And so it's so fascinating to me that we do know the cause. We understand the etiology of a lot of these diseases, but like you just hit that nail on the head so eloquently, the way you always do, and that is, it's a lifestyle disease that sometimes we need a total education, a makeover. Fast foods came along, antibiotics came along, other medicines came along. And all of a sudden, pollutants in my plastic.
Yes.
What's wrong, by the way, with my plastic in my bottle?
Gosh, let's really educate. This is something that I tell every single patient when they come in, because usually they come in with a plastic water bottle. Interestingly enough, those plastics produce something called phthalates. And phthalates are a xenoestrogen. Xeno is the Greek word for foreign. And so it's an estrogen that basically interrupts. Every cell is covered with what I call this magical membrane, which is made up of essential fatty acids. And so what happens is those xenoestrogens start attacking the membrane, which are all the receptor sites where all the nutrition and all the hormones work. So basically interfere with the turning on and off of every cell in our body. So xenoestrogens, and it's not just the plastics, it's the insecticides, it's the pesticides, and we're getting it everywhere in the food you eat, the water we drink, and the soil that everything is grown in. So it's inescapable. So all of us need to take the measures, and one is to stop drinking out of plastic water bottles.
What do you and your family do at home? Do you have a reverse osmosis there on your sink, or something you just drink out of a glass?
No, we have a very, very special water maker in our system, in our garage, that does the whole house, because you have the chlorine in the shower.
Yep.
And then the drinking water and all your cooking water. And I bring my own water. I have a glass water bottle that I carry everywhere. I show patients, look, this is what I bring everywhere. And patients need to learn how to do that.
We need to get one of those things, guys, one of these water makers. And I'll just, before I go on, like a little bird, lay under it and get my water that way. There's a whole lot of education going on at their center, the South Coast Medical Center for New NEW Medicine. I'm going to ask why for new medicine when we get back from this break. Dr. Lee Erin Connealy joins me today, and from time to time we get some of her time. She's from California, from the Los Angeles area, Irvine, California area, and she is the medical advisor for a center called the South Coast Medical Center for New Medicine. For New Medicine. Now there's other centers for medicine in Los Angeles. You know, I can't count them on my fingers and toes, but this one is for new medicine. I always thought the word nutrition should be spelled N-E-W, trition, not, you know, the way it's spelled. For new medicine, how is what is practiced at your center, because you have a lot of doctors that work there. You even have a biological dentist that removes amalgam, psychologist. I mean, you've got all the bases covered there. How is that different from another center out there in Los Angeles?
Well, we do things differently, Doug, because conventional medicine, as you know, is you have the symptom and you get this prescription. And that basic way of doing things for the last, penicillin came out in 1940. We've been doing that for the last 60 years,
yeah.
Something like that. And so obviously that way of taking care of patients is not working. It's great in an emergency situation, a drug for high blood pressure, a drug for your blood sugar, a drug to prevent a heart attack, or you're in a car accident. But for the chronic treatment of illness, you have got to use other modalities. And the other modalities, we have energy medicine, we do homeopathy, we do nutrition, we do psychological evaluation, we do acupuncture, we do certain IVs, I always tell people I practice whatever works medicine, because I'm there with the patient. Every individual's an original. And when you come in, what works for you doesn't work for the next person. So I got to find out what's going on in your mind, body, and spirit, and come up with a customized prescription plan for you.
This robotic medicine, I call it, you go see a doctor like a robot, you're going to get a prescription. And it had to be done. There's 300 million of us. It's kind of like silos. They're kind of responsible for putting those mycotoxins in our grain supply, but they have to be there because we have to feed this planet. So this robotic medicine, 10 years ago, it was very common for a woman to go to a doctor, 45 years old, and the doctor to do an exam, and then at the end of the exam say, "You're fine." Wow, whew, that's great, thanks, doc. And then for the nurse to come back in and hand the woman a couple of prescriptions for hormone replacement therapy. Of course, the Women's Health Initiative changed all of that, but that's something that needs to be addressed right now, and I know you see so many women and men with hormonal aberrations, sex hormone aberrations. I keep thinking this was no mistake by God to shut hormones off from the female at 48, 49, 50 years old, and yet in this United States, we look at pregnancy as a disease. You got a disease, there's something growing in front of you. Your hormones are shutting off. Well, it's a horrible disease, but don't worry, I'm going to be there for you. You need to see me off, and I'm going to give you a prescription. And now that's come back to snap us. The Women's Health Initiative said hormone replacement therapy is not a good thing. And I'm watching the drug companies now saying, yeah, but a little bit's okay. We just gave them too much. Now let's give them a little. I don't buy that as far as I can throw it. Are there alternatives to prescribing pregnant mare urine to the women of America?
Yes, and that's the clarification. The Women's Health Initiative used hormones that are not biologically identical to your hormones. They used Premarin, which comes from pregnant mare's urine, plus they used a synthetic progesterone called Provera. So those are not, they're medicines. They're basically toxins to the body. Your body cannot use hormones that are not biologically identical to yours. And yes, we are experiencing a tremendous amount of hormonal problems. But look, if you think about the body as it was born, and we're supposed to have this perfect balance of water, we're not supposed to have this invasion of microorganisms from fungi to bacteria to viruses to parasites. Then you talk about the pollutions. You know, they've done blood tests on humans, and they found there's over 200 chemicals in every single person. Regardless of where you are or what you do, it doesn't matter if you're living in the pristine areas of Montana or the Antarctica, the pollutants and environmental chemicals are everywhere. So we have to take that, and our body wasn't designed for that. Then you talk about the electrosmog around us, from the cell phones to the computers, the lights, It's electropollution, which really nobody's talking about, unfortunately, now. But that's probably a big problem. You read about the report about the bees.
Yeah.
There have been a dramatic reduction, and that's because they have a built-in honing device that helps them find their beehive. And so now we have all these disturbances that we didn't have 100 years ago, Doug. So the hormonal disturbances from your thyroid to your adrenals, for a male, their testes, for a female, their ovaries, and their pancreas, their blood sugars. And these can manifest. What do people, the biggest symptom people experience are fatigue. For men and women, it's loss of sex drive. Your mental stability, your moods are changed. Your ability to develop muscle, your skin starts to age, your immune system. Every facet in your body is affected by hormones. People don't understand it, but estrogen affects over 3 different organs and cells in your body. It's not a small thing. It affects the body in a dramatic, phenomenal way. And so if you're going to get the maximum vitality out of a human being, you need hormones to turn the body on and off appropriately.
What are the most common symptoms? I'm saying this a little greedily. What are the most common symptoms men? We know the symptoms. I mean, every television show and radio show in America has talked about them. But I want to know at 58 years old, what should I be going through? And I'm going to keep a total straight face while you're telling me what symptoms you see in your practice men go through.
Well, men, they're kind of funny.
Because
Because
we are.
when they come in, they don't think they have anything wrong with them. And I have to get them out of it. But if you sit down, which I always do, I believe in, look, we're gonna be friends. We're gonna be partners in your healthcare. And because, as I said before, patients know what's wrong with them. And I have this exhaustive questionnaire that they do in private. And little do they know that I read it. And I find out, and you're right, they're fatigued. You mentioned about hot flashes in women, but men have experienced hot flashes if their testosterone gets too low. Their sense of well-being, guys will come in and say, Dr. Connealy, I just don't have that same drive that I had when I was 30 years of age. And not just the drive, the sex drive. We're talking about the get up and go drive.
Yeah, kind of the oomph.
Yes, and then they just feel blah. Their mood is like, okay, I could care less. Their muscle mass, when they work out, they don't develop that. They may have erectile dysfunction.
Very common. It's interesting, until these pills came out and guys couldn't throw a football through a swinging tube, till all these ads came on TV, it didn't come out of the closet. All of a sudden, everybody has restless leg syndrome. Every American wants a butterfly to land on their sill of their bed. I mean, it's amazing the way these drug companies have awoken a sleeping giant. We're really sick. When people have these symptoms, you have a choice, and that's what this show is all about. It's called Know the Cause. What Dr. Connealy is teaching you today is understand why the drive is gone. Understand why this is going on. Get to the root cause and try and fix it. At the South Coast Medical Center for New Medicine, that's exactly what they do. Now, throughout the show, you've seen the telephone number go up. Go ahead and give them a buzz if you'd like. A lot of people watching on KDOC in Los Angeles. This is a medical center that cares. Education's important. We'll be right back. Look at how pretty that is. Even the bottles look good. That's perfectly healthy products that the good Dr. Connealy has put together. This is kind of an interesting one. This is for a disease we call onychomycosis. Onychomycosis is nail fungus. A lot of us have it. Take your socks off tonight, when you're going to bed, and look at your toes. If they're thick and, ugly, then you have onychomycosis. Great product. Let's talk a little bit about not so much onychomycosis, but other conditions caused by yeast. Diabetes we've talked about. I think there's an intimate link between fungus, streptozotocin certainly, and diabetes. What about serious diseases? What about, God forbid, cancer and fungus? You think there's a link there?
Well, I have read extensively on this, and it's interesting. They found that in every specimen of cancer exists fungus or lactic acid, which is just a production byproduct of fungus. And so, as you mentioned earlier about diabetes and fungus, probably, and people, it's sad, but most people don't really understand this. It's not something that's talked about until they get a white tongue or, like you said, their toenails or their fingernails. But frequently patients will come in with abdominal bloating. They're swollen, Doug. They're swollen in their face. They put on weight. I can't lose weight, Dr. Connealy. My head is foggy. I'm dizzy. I'm confused. I'm disoriented. Candida is devastating. The mild cases to extreme cases are devastating. And once you have Candida in the gut, it's inflamed and it just basically destroys the whole body.
It disseminates. They say cancer metastasizes and fungus disseminates. That word means the same thing. Fungus can metastasize also. Bill Crook was right. Did you ever meet Bill?
No.
Oh, it's a great guy. Bill Crook wrote The Yeast Connection.
Yes, I do know
Yeah,
that.
many, many years ago. He's since passed, but an absolutely wonderful guy that started the ball rolling in a
Yes,
medical
you're
journal
absolutely right.
about mental aberrations in yeast. And now it's gone, believe me, the doctor of the future will recognize yeast, mold, mildew, fungus as the etiology, the root cause of so many health problems. Diet at their center is important. Look, we put up their telephone number, give them a buzz. They're wonderful people. This is a new medicine clinic, and it's named that for a reason. This isn't stereotypical at all. This is different. Thank you so much, Dr. Connealy, for
Well, it's
coming
great
in today
being
and
here,
talking.
Doug.
It's always
Thanks.
great to have you. God bless you, folks. Liliana, thank you for joining us. Dr. Connealy, thank you for joining us today. We want to talk a little bit today about what goes on inside your clinic as opposed to, look, these folks have been in lots of medical clinics. We all have been in well, all of you have been in lots of medical clinics. Yours is so different. From the second you walk up to the front door, just beauty all over the place. But the tender-hearted, I mean, I just met Liliana, who is your nutritionist. Tell us a little bit about what's different at your center.
Well, first of all, our clinic is very different because we wanted to create a healing environment. Let's face it, when people come to the doctor, they really don't want to be there, Doug. They are unhappy, they don't feel good, or they have some serious, serious news that they've just dealt with. So we try to create a healing, peaceful, wonderful environment. So all of our decorations and all of our clinic is designed with that in mind, so that the patient really doesn't mind being there.
Dr. Connealy, you worked in these centers, you know, big major training centers, hospitals and so forth, where they had the curtain between the naked people. You know, you slide one curtain over and go examine that patient, go to the next one. Was it at that time that you said, okay, this won't work? What I want to do is create this, or when did you get it that people want a medical sanctuary? A medical place to open their heart and share their hurt and share their feeling?
Actually, the first office I ever opened was like that. It was actually in California, in Beverly Hills, and I decorated it such like they were really at home.
Yep.
And so, people, it was a very, very small clinic, but people felt comfortable, they felt at home, they didn't feel like they can't really talk about their problems.
When a patient comes to see you, do some come for a physical? I just want to come in and see Dr. Connealy and have a physical. The difference is this woman sitting to your left. And what Liliana does is sit down with the patient and say, are you happy where you are? If not, and most aren't, I would imagine, how can they change? Liliana, what do you, and the word impose is so imposing, what do you impart? What information do you impart upon these patients to encourage them to change and stick with it?
Well, Doug, one of the advantages of working with Dr. Connealy is that I have medical records to look at. So right away we can establish, what is our main focus? Is it metabolic syndrome? Is it diabetes? Do we need to work on if they have cancer? What is it that we need to establish? And then I ask them, what do you see would be a successful outcome? What are your goals? How can we integrate this together? So with what I see as necessity and what they see as their personal goals, then we integrate it and establish a personal program for them.
Really good point. Thank you. I never thought of that. You can really see kind of the history on the patient, and they don't
Absolutely.
mind. I mean,
Right.
you're a credentialed person. Dr. Connealy, what's wrong today? In other words, the status quo, you graduated from medical school, did postdoctorate degrees and so forth. The status quo would tell most people watching TV that they need a new drug. They can't sleep, they don't have energy. It's simple. They just take a new drug. Where does your mind and that cross, that mentality cross? In other words, chronic fatigue. Probably you hear that more than anything else at the clinic, weight loss and chronic fatigue.